You see, everybody has their own childhood past versions. So, I want to start off by asking you a question and taking you back. When we think about our past lives, there are many thoughts that perhaps cross our minds. Our past could be as simple as the delicious lunch you had yesterday, or as difficult as that hard time you had to go through, but has definitely shaped you into this beautiful person you are today. Reminiscing on our past helps bring perspective to our lives today. It helps us realize how much we've grown, or how much we still have to grow. You see, everybody has their own childhood past versions, and mine is distinctively from my 2010 Syrian summer, 9 years ago. I remember Aleppo's heat would be blazing with its rays of sunlight, giving you the sense of literally melting as soon as you would take a step outdoors. But there was this one cool, refreshing area in my grandma's kitchen floor that would make you forget about the heat from the sickening sun, even for just a few moments. I remember every Friday afternoon, I would be sitting on that kitchen floor with my cousins. The room would simply be filled with happiness and positivity, as I still remember my grandpa's hysterical laugh as he spat out the coffee that my aunt had made for him because she replaced the 2 spoons of sugar with 2 spoons of salt. And something to note about us Syrians is to never mess with our coffee. But it's safe to say that my 2010 Syrian summer was one of the last joyful ones, as the Civil Syrian War began just 1 year after. I was 9 and so confused as to why we weren't going to Syria as we did every single year before that. I still remember my dad's face vividly when he found out the news about Syria's current political situation. I didn't understand much, but I did understand one thing. Syria that summer was not going to happen. And little did I know, Syria for a couple of years after that was still not going to happen. Oftentimes, a voice plays in my head telling me to write a letter to my younger self. But how? How do you tell a 9-year-old that 2 years from now, Syria the way she remembers it, kitchen floor, cousins, grandpa, and coffee, are no more? How do you tell a 9-year-old that 3 years from now, her aunt that made the salty coffee for her father would be forced out of her house with nothing but a bag of clothes for her 5- and 7-year-old daughters, her husband, and herself? In just 2 hours, they would evacuate as refugees and leave everything behind to go to a European country they knew nothing about, not to mention taking the route by sea. Knowing how dangerous that is, putting their daughters at a risk of drowning, but being convinced that anything was more merciful than staying in Syria, which is now known as a war zone country. How do you tell a 9-year-old that 5 years from now, the kitchen floor is in the ruins because of a grenade? And most importantly, how do you tell a 9-year-old that 8 years from now, the Syrian Civil War still exists? When I was that 9-year-old girl, I would give my thoughts embedded with hope in regards to Syria's future. That perhaps 1, 2, maximum 3 years, and I would be back in my motherland, sitting on that kitchen floor. But of course, that isn't the reality. And we have media outlets falsifying that the war doesn't exist, or that in some areas it's decreasing. Then please explain to me why we have Syrians in the 21st century without the justice they deserve. Why do we have mothers losing their children because of a war they had no say in? Why do we have refugee children not granted the opportunity of living as regular children, as a refugee child is a child first and foremost, the United Nations definition of a refugee child? So, when I was growing up, I didn't necessarily grow up in Syria. I was miles and miles away from the actual war zone, and I felt guilty. But my overriding guilt allowed a desire to make a change to be born within me. I didn't know how, but I knew I had to get something done. And this was only evident to me when I saw my cousins, family, friends mistreated because of a simple refugee title they possessed. And so, I read this famous saying, if you want something done right, you should do it yourself. And ladies and gentlemen, that is exactly what I did. Upon my middle years of high school, a path was revealed to me through one of IB's mid-year programs called the Personal Project. I knew I had to grasp this opportunity and make it in regards to my desire to help out these refugee children. I worked with Kakuma Refugee Camp and UNHCR Kenya in order to do just that. The educative privilege most children in the 21st century take for granted is the same privilege that's limited or ripped away from our refugee children. And so, I was able to shed light on this conversation by hosting an event in school. General public and students were invited, where I, UNHCR Kenya members, and Kakuma Refugee Camp members spoke up about the current situation. Students participated by asking questions, and messages were received. Not to mention, I was able to raise hundreds of books to these refugee children, with the help of the students in my school, of course. I want you to take something from this. You see, as one person, you can make a difference, no matter the impact you want to create or no matter your intention. Take it from somebody who's up here, who doesn't necessarily like public speaking, as you may have noticed, but wants to spread my message to the rest of the world. Because something to note is that we write our own futures. Take that step outdoors. Take that you're courageous and you can do it. Because together we can make a larger impact. Thank you.